I do not keep my big box of salt beside the pepper. I keep it under the kitchen sink. That is where my daughter found it last spring, between a pan cleaner and a spray I had bought for the cutting board. She held up the salt and said, "Mom, why is this down here?" Before I answered, I showed her 3 things. I dropped an egg into a pie plate, broke the yolk, and covered the slippery mess with salt. I put 2 warm bottles of water into 2 bowls of ice, then added salt to only 1 bowl. And I set my oldest cast iron skillet on the table, with food stuck hard to the bottom. "Give me 10 minutes," I told her. By the time those 10 minutes were over, the egg was easier to lift, 1 bottle was noticeably colder, and the skillet was already cleaner. That is when she stopped laughing. I am 88, and I do not believe every old household trick deserves to survive. Some are exaggerated, some are useless, a few are unsafe. But 7 salt tricks have earned a place in my house because they solve ordinary problems without another expensive bottle gadget or packet. My mother kept 2 salts, a small shaker for supper and a larger box for work. She never called these things hacks. She asked 1 question before spending money. What do we already have that can do the job? I will show you the 7 answers I trust. And near the end, I will show you 3 popular salt tricks I would never risk in my kitchen. The first is the one that makes younger people lean over the bowl and watch. My grandson came through the back door after helping a neighbor clear branches. His shirt was damp, and the only water in my refrigerator had been put there less than an hour earlier. "It is barely cold," he said. I took 2 sealed plastic bottles and 2 metal bowls. Into each bowl, I put the same amount of ice and enough water to reach most of the way up the bottles. Then I added several spoonfuls of salt to 1 bowl and left the other alone. My grandson watched me turn both bottles through the ice water. "Why the salt?" he asked. "Because ice cubes leave warm gaps," I said. "Water touches the whole bottle. Salt helps that icy water become colder." After several minutes, we dried both bottles and compared them. The bottle from the salted bowl felt colder. That is the payoff people remember. This is not magic, and I do not promise an exact number of minutes. A warm drink takes longer than a cool one. A larger bottle needs more time than a small can. But for a drink you want to chill quickly, the method is simple: ice water, salt, and gentle turning. I use plastic bottles or sturdy cans. I avoid thin glass that could crack from a sudden temperature change. I never drink the salty water, and I wipe the container before opening it. This trick does not replace a refrigerator or keep food safe during an outage. It does one job. It chills a sealed drink faster than leaving it on ice alone. My grandson took one sip and looked back at the bowl. "That came from the salt." I nodded. The cheapest box in the kitchen had won his attention. The next trick begins with a mess nobody wants to touch. A raw egg does not stay where it lands. It slides. The white runs under the cabinet edge. The yolk breaks. A paper towel pushes the whole thing farther across the floor. That happened to me while I was baking a cake for my daughter's birthday. My first instinct was to grab a rag. Then I heard my mother's voice. "The first thing you do with a mess is stop making it larger." I covered the egg with a generous layer of salt and left it alone for several minutes. The salt absorbed some of the moisture and made the spill less slippery. It did not turn the egg into a hard cake, and I would not tell you that it did. What it did was make the mess easier to gather. I slid a piece of cardboard beneath it and lifted most of the egg in one pass instead of smearing it across 3 feet of tile. Then I used paper towels for what remained and cleaned the floor with a suitable cleaner. That last step matters. Salt helps collect a raw egg. It does not sanitize the floor. The savings are small but real. Fewer paper towels, less cleaner, less time on my knees chasing egg white into the corners. My mother used salt for the same reason she kept an old dustpan beside the stove. She understood that good housekeeping was often about controlling a problem before trying to erase it. One handful of salt did not undo the accident. It kept one broken egg from becoming a larger one. The next use protects a pan that has served my family longer than any appliance I own. My cast iron skillet is older than my daughter. My mother cooked in it before I did, and the handle has been worn smooth by 2 generations of hands. That pan has outlasted 3 refrigerators, 4 kitchen tables, and every cooking tool I was once told I needed. After potatoes or meat food sticks to the surface in brown patches. When the skillet is cool enough to handle safely but still warm, I sprinkle coarse salt over the stuck area. I fold a clean cloth into a thick pad and work the salt across the surface with steady pressure. The grains act like a mild mechanical scrub. They help lift stuck food without my scraping the pan with a sharp metal tool. Once the debris loosens, I discard the salt, clean the skillet normally, dry it completely, and apply a thin layer of oil. I do not use this method on non-stick cookware. Salt can damage delicate coatings. I follow the manufacturer's directions for newer pans because not every dark skillet is cast iron, and salt will not repair a crack, remove serious rust, or rebuild ruined seasoning. But for the ordinary residue left after supper, it saves me from buying another specialty cleaner. It also helps me preserve a pan worth keeping. People sometimes talk about saving money as though it means choosing the lowest price today. At my age, I see it differently. Saving money often means caring for one good thing so well that you do not have to buy it again. My mother gave me the skillet. Salt helps me keep using it. The next trick saves food rather than cookware, and you can see the difference on 2 slices of apple. When I prepare apples for a pie, I work slowly than my mother did. By the time I finish peeling the last apple, the first slices are turning brown. So I place a bowl of cold water beside the cutting board and stir in a pinch of salt. As I cut, I drop each slice into the bowl. The lightly salted water slows the surface browning while I finish my work. When I am ready, I remove the apples, rinse them, drain them, and use them right away. This is not long-term preservation. It is not a reason to leave cut fruit sitting all afternoon. And too much salt or too long a soak can affect flavor and texture. It simply buys me a little working time. To show my daughter, I cut 2 pieces from the same apple. One stayed on a plate. The other went into the lightly salted water. Later, the slice exposed to the air had darkened first. The soaked slice still looked fresher. The same method can help with peeled potatoes while you finish preparing a meal. My mother never used the word oxidation. She said, "Do not let the air finish your work before you do." That sentence stayed with me. A brown apple is still edible, but people often reject food with tired-looking edges. A bowl of water and a pinch of salt can make a tray look fresher and keep fruit from being discarded for appearance alone. That is another kind of saving. Not dramatic. Not glamorous. Just one less reason to throw away something you already paid for. The next two tricks replace cleaners I once bought in small, expensive bottles. My glass coffee carafe collected a brown ring around the bottom curve. A sponge could not reach it. My hand could not fit through the opening. I bought narrow brushes and special tablets. Then I returned to a simpler method. First, I let the carafe cool. I never put ice into hot glass because a temperature change can crack it. When the glass is cool and intact, I add several ice cubes, a spoonful of salt, and a little water. I hold the carafe and swirl it gently. The ice moves around the bottom. The salt adds light abrasion. Together, they help loosen the coffee film in the places a sponge cannot reach. I do not shake hard. I do not use the method on chipped or cracked glass. When I am finished, I pour everything out, wash the carafe normally, rinse it thoroughly, and inspect it before using it again. The change is easiest to see against a white towel. The brown haze is reduced and the glass looks clearer. This does not rescue every stain. An old baked-on deposit may need the cleaner recommended by the manufacturer. But most of the time, I no longer need a separate product for the bottom of my coffee pot. One ordinary box of salt already open in my cupboard does enough. The next cleaner I stopped buying was the little bottle sold to remove smells from wooden cutting boards. The salt helps again, but this time it needs half a lemon. After chopping onions or garlic, my wooden cutting board can hold the smell. The smell can linger long after supper. I sprinkle coarse salt over the board and rub it with half a lemon, moving with the grain of the wood. The salt helps loosen surface residue. The lemon helps freshen the odor. Afterward, I wash the board normally and dry it, standing it where air can reach both sides. I do not call this disinfection. If the board has held raw meat, poultry, or fish, it still needs proper cleaning. If it is deeply cracked, warped, or impossible to clean, salt and lemon will not make it safe again. I keep lemon away from marble and other natural stone that acids can etch. The seventh trick is simpler. For brown rings inside a glazed mug, I make a damp paste with salt and water. With a soft cloth, I rub the stain gently, then wash and rinse the mug. The salt supplies mild abrasion without specialty powder. I do not use it on delicate decoration, metallic trim unglazed pottery, or anything the manufacturer says should not be scrubbed. Between the cutting board and the mugs, I stopped buying two products that promised one narrow job each. That is the part people miss when they hear save money. I am not claiming one box of salt replaces the entire cleaning aisle. I am saying that before I buy a product for one tiny problem, I check whether something plain in my cupboard can handle it safely. Often the answer is yes, but not always. 3 popular salt tricks fail that test, and one of them can become dangerous very quickly. The first is using salt as the plan for a grease fire. Never throw water on burning grease. Water can spread the flames. For a small pan fire, if it is safe, turn off the heat and cover the pan with a metal lid or baking sheet to cut off the oxygen. Use the fire extinguisher if you know how. If the fire spreads, leave, close the door, and call emergency services. I will not stand over flames pouring boxes of salt while the fire grows. The second claim is that soaking a dirty sponge in salt water makes it clean and safe again. A sponge can hold grease, food residue, and microorganisms inside. Salt water does not magically restore it. When a sponge smells bad, breaks apart, or has cleaned a risky mess, I replace it. The third claim is that salt, baking soda, and vinegar can clear every clogged drain. The foam looks impressive, but bubbles are not proof that hair grease or a blockage has disappeared. Some clogs need a drain tool. Others need a plumber. I do not pour mixtures or boiling water into pipes without knowing what the plumbing can safely handle. These limits are part of the lesson. Old advice is not valuable merely because it is old. It is valuable when it works, when it is used for the right problem, and when it does not ask you to ignore a safer answer. My mother trusted plain household methods. She also trusted Lid's professional's instructions and common sense. That balance is the wisdom worth keeping. Use salt when salt is enough. Put it down when it is not. When my daughter and I finished testing the 7 tricks, we went back to the cabinet beneath the sink. We did not throw everything away. I kept the products that did a job salt could not do safely. But 3 specialty cleaners came out of the cabinet. One for the cast iron pan, one for the coffee carafe, and one for cutting board odors. In their place sat 1 box of salt. On the table were the results: a cold bottle beaded with moisture, a raw egg gathered instead of smeared, my mother's skillet, clean and dark, pale apple slices, a clearer coffee pot, a fresher wooden board, a mug without its brown ring. None of these tricks will make a family rich. That was never the promise. They save a little product, a little food, a little time, and one unnecessary purchase at a time. Over a lifetime, those small decisions become a habit. My mother was not teaching me to fear spending money. She was teaching me to pause before I spent it. Learn what the plain things can do, she used to say. Then buy what they cannot. That is the rule I still use at 88. Now tell me which of these 7 salt tricks was new to you, and tell me what your parents or grandparents used salt for in their own homes. Useful family knowledge is often lost because nobody tests it, explains it honestly, and passes it forward. A box of salt costs very little. Knowing exactly when to use it and when not to is the part worth saving.